both. I urge my colleagues to reject the resolution that Senator Inhofe has offered and to continue to protect the health and welfare of our citizens. Thank you very much. I yield the floor.
The senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent. I will not ask unanimous. The next speaker will be Senator Hoeven for 6 minutes.
President, thank you, Senator Inhofe. I rise to speak on the Utility MAC issue. The EPA's Utility MAC rule is a clear example of how overzealous regulations and how the lack of a sensible energy policy are derailing investment and costing Americans jobs. Let me say at the outset that I support good, responsible policies to protect human health and to safeguard our environment. These rules, however, need to bear the qualities of all good rules. They need to be simple, efficient, achievable, and affordable. In short, they need to make sense from both an environmental and an economic perspective. Unfortunately, as written, the Utility MAC rule and others like it that the EPA is proposing fail to find that proper balance. To the contrary, burdensome and complex new rules for the coal industry will not only discourage responsible energy growth, but will prompt the complete shutdown of dozens of power plants. That will increase energy costs for consumers and businesses and sadly force thousands of hardworking Americans onto the unemployment rolls. Utility MAC alone will require power plants to install costly emissions controls by 2015 with a price tag for compliance of nearly $10 billion annually. $10 billion annually. Moreover, the EPA has made it clear that there will only be limited extensions to give utilities the time they need to make the changes. Now, we will have an opportunity to vote either to retain or to reject the Utility MAC rule under the Congressional Review Act. In fact, it is exactly this kind of rule that the Congressional Review Act was designed to address by allowing Congress to review a new regulation and overrule it if that regulation is unfair or overreaching, which is exactly the case in this instance. So we can send the EPA back to the drawing board. We can insist that the agency come up with a plan that is simpler, more affordable, and most importantly, that is fairer by taking into account the livelihoods of hardworking Americans and their families. And, Mr. President, that's exactly what we need to do. In my home state of North Dakota, we have a lot of coal-fired electric generation. We supply power not only to our state but to the surrounding states as well, Minnesota, South Dakota, Montana, and well beyond. And the reality is that we're producing more power, more electricity, and we're doing it with better environmental stewardship because in our state we've created the right legal tax and regulatory climate to stimulate that private investment that is driving the new technologies. In fact, we not only produce coal-fired electricity, we also convert coal into synthetic natural gas. But we're successfully doing that because we're driving the investment that's spurring the new technologies, that's producing more energy, and as we produce more energy, that same technology is also enabling us to do it with better environmental stewardship. And that's the win that we all seek. That's the win that we all seek, because that's not only about providing more electricity, more power, more energy for this country at a lower cost so that consumers benefit. It's also about creating high-quality, high-paying jobs for our American workers and at the same time providing better environmental technology through this investment, providing better environmental stewardship through this investment in new technologies. That's exactly what's happening because we're empowering the industry to produce more electricity, to develop, to grow, and again, to produce, to develop the technology that produces more energy with that better better stewardship. So that is the direction we need to go, and that's why I urge my colleagues to vote for this Congressional Review Act that would require EPA to go back and redraft this rule. It's in the interest of the American workers whose jobs depend on the coal industry, and ultimately it is in the best interest of Americans who not only need the energy, but again, as we're able to continue to develop the technology, we produce better and better environmental stewardship. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Thank the Senator, and I recognize the Senator from Alabama for 6 minutes.
Senator from Alabama.
Mr. President, I thank my colleague, Senator Inhofe, who's been such a leader on these issues and has contributed so much to the national discussion as we wrestle with the challenges of trying to have affordable energy for Americans, to maintain our business competitiveness and improve the quality of our air and environment. And we can do those things. We have been doing those things, and we're going to continue to do those things. But this Senate Resolution 37 under the dealing with the Utility Act provides us an opportunity to make a strong statement and reject the idea, the program that EPA has adopted that will damage this economy, will drive up the cost of energy in America for every American throughout this country, drive up the cost of energy for American business who is struggling now to hire workers and be competitive. And if we have an advantage on the world market today, every expert tells us it's because of a decline in natural gas prices. And we have competitive electricity prices from coal. So we have competitive electricity prices from our largest source, coal, and we have surprising, wonderful new finds in natural gas that are allowing our energy to be cheaper too. This helps us create jobs and growth. And we have within the administration a number of people, and I hate to say all the way to the top, who seem to believe that cheap energy is not a goal, that cheap energy is not something that should be brought forth, because I guess that would make their alternative sources, solar and wind and other things, even less competitive than they are today. Now, we can develop those programs, we can seek to advance those programs, but in truth, we should not be mandating these much higher costs on the American people, hammering our economy, which in effect is a tax increase on the American economy. So this is a $90 billion rule, the most expensive environmental rule in our nation's history. $90 billion is the amount that the EPA acknowledges that they will, that this rule will cost. The Review Act that Senator Inhofe has triggered, this Review Act says you can have this vote, this review of any regulation over $100 million. $90 billion is 900 times larger than $100 million. It's the largest rule in American history. It changes the course of our economy. It's the kind of thing that members who are elected to answer to the American people should be voting on. Not having it done in a basically bureaucratic process without having elected individuals engaged in it. The Congressional Review Act has a fundamental weakness. That weakness is that if the Congress votes to overturn an act, the President can veto it. And you have this odd situation where the President, you have to know, appoints the bureaucrats. And he appoints the head of the EPA. And the people all work throughout the executive branch and for the President, directly or indirectly, directly really. And they produce regulations the President desires that they produce. And they don't produce regulations he does not desire they produce. So the result is that Congress has an awfully difficult time overturning it because the President can veto the thing that we pass. We need something like the RAIN Act, who will actually replaces this unconstitutional, non-traditional procedure of impacting our economy with monumental regulations and putting that back in the Congress, and so that Congress is required to vote on these regulations. Mr. President, my time I know is running out, but I just want to reiterate that the impact of the legislation, if not changed, the regulations, if not changed, will drive up the cost of energy for every single American, for all businesses in America. It will achieve only a modest improvement in mercury reductions over what President Bush proposed, and I think it is so extreme that it hammers the coal processing and energy production in America, basically making coal no longer a realistic way to produce electricity in America. That is a huge event that impacts the economy. Fundamentally, this regulation would say that, yes, we've reduced mercury emissions by 50%. I would ask for one additional moment, Mr. President. Unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Yes, we've reduced the emissions of mercury since 1990 by 50%. Yes, President Bush proposed a very effective, sophisticated plan to further reduce those emissions by 75%, 75% more. But there were problems with it. The courts found a problem with it. Instead of pursuing the matter in the fashion President Bush did, the new regulations call for this dramatic 90% reduction of mercury emissions, far more than we are able to do technologically and financially, I believe. And that's why I salute Senator Inhofe for this resolution, and will support it. I thank the Chair. Will yield the floor.
Thank you. How much time do we have left, including the 40 seconds we didn't use the first round?
5 minutes in total on the senator's side.
First of all, let me I thank you. Let me just comment on something I'm glad the senator from Alabama brought up, because it's very significant. The frailty in the CRA, and for a lot of our fellow members are not really familiar with the history of that, is that the president can veto it. Here's I'm a little bit hopeful in this case, if we are successful. Because does the president really want to veto, just a few months before the election, a bill that is going to cost the American people over 200,000 jobs this year, and along with all of the costs that they admit? I mean, the EPA itself says $10 billion, but it's going to be considerably more than that by everyone else's. So I hold that out as a hope that even though he would love to veto it if we're successful, I don't think he'll do it, because he wants to get reelected more than he wants to veto this. And I would also comment, and I thought it was worth bringing up, the other side had an opportunity to do something about real pollution. We're talking about SOx, NOx, and mercury. We're not talking about CO2. If you remember the Clear Skies Act, that was such a successful operation. It was back during the Bush administration. That would have mandated the 75% reduction that the senator from Alabama talked about in SOx, NOx, and mercury. Those are real pollutants. But it was held hostage because they didn't include CO2. And at that time, that was the crown jewel of their efforts. So all I can say in this remaining time that we have, everything has been said, but it hadn't said by everybody, and I'm not going to repeat that and have to be so redundant. I think the points that were made by all the senators who spoke, looking at the economy of this, looking at how devastating this would be in terms of jobs in America. But if you look about the utility MAC, it's not about public health, it's about killing coal. And everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. And people from coal states are trying to act like that is not the case, and it is the case. And I think we are all very much aware of that. According to EPA's own analysis, utility MAC will cost the $10 billion, but others have it on up higher than that. However, if $10 billion a year to implement it is correct, then it will only yield $6 million in projected benefits, health benefits. Now, this is the EPA talking. This isn't me. It's the EPA. And that's a 1,600 to 1 ratio. Now, that's not a very good ratio to depend on. And I'd like to address the myth that top EPA officials are perpetrating, and that's the idea that coal is not being killed by the EPA regulations, but by that cheaper price of natural gas. EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson said recently that is simply a coincidence. The EPA's rules are coming out at the same time that natural gas prices are low, so utilities are naturally moving toward natural gas. Well, you know, her message was don't blame the EPA. The truth is that the EPA itself has admitted that the agency deliberately and consciously made a decision to kill coal. The EPA Region 1 Administrator, Kurt Spalding, was caught on tape saying Lisa Jackson has put forth a very powerful message to the country just 2 days ago, and I'm quoting now, the decision on greenhouse gas performance standard, and saying basically gas plants are the performance standard, which means if you want to build a coal plant, you've got a big problem. He also went on to say that the decision by the EPA to kill coal was, quote, painful every step of the way. Because you got to remember, if you go to West Virginia, you go to Pennsylvania, he could have included the other states in there too, such as Ohio, Illinois, and Missouri. But he said in all of those places, you have coal communities who depend on coal, and they're going to put those people out. This is a very serious attack that's taking place right now, and I think that when we saw the attack on fossil fuels as presented by the Region 6 Administrator Armendariz, when he said the truth is that the EPA's general philosophy is to crucify and make examples of oil companies and gas companies. Well, I only bring that up because many people think this is just about coal. No, it's very clear. It's fossil fuels. This has been the relentless war of this president on fossil fuels. That's coal, gas, and oil ever since he has been in office. And it was the president of the Sierra Club who said just a short while ago, yes, utility MAC is about killing coal. Fine, we can kill coal. That doesn't mean we want to change and start using natural gas because it's also a fossil fuel. It may be that over in the House it took Nancy Pelosi 6 months to recognize that natural gas is a fossil fuel, but it is. So this is just the beginning. This is the one where he's admittedly trying to kill coal because that's an easier target. In his belief, there are fewer states that are the big producers of coal, so go after them first. I know my time has expired. I only want to say, in closing, we'll have another opportunity tomorrow. There are many other people wanting to be heard who don't want to kill coal and have this dramatic negative effect on our economy, our jobs, and our ability to produce the necessary energy to run this machine called America. If we're dependent upon just under 50% for our entire generation ability on coal, just imagine what that's going to happen if they're successful to the price of the remaining available fuel. And of course, they would be subject next. So I'm going to urge our people to forget just for a short period of time this president's obligation to certain small groups and oppose the utility MACs. You know, we went through the same thing with greenhouse gases, and we fought that battle before. I say to my good friend, Senator Boxer from California. And so we're doing it, and at that time, there are many efforts, legislative efforts to kill, at that time, as greenhouse gases, and yet every time there's a vote, people who are answerable to the American people were the ones who voted it down. Now there might be at most 25 votes in the United States Senate in favor of the greenhouse gas emissions. So
Senator,
I urge to pass my CRA and let the President decide what he's going to do about vetoing this issue.
Mr. President.
Senator from California.
Mr. President, for the rest of our time, I'd like to take just 3 minutes now and then yield up to 15 minutes to the senator from New Jersey, and then ask my friend who's in the chair to take up to 15 minutes, if he would like to at that time, and I'll sit in the chair. And if that's
without objection.
All right. Well, I just want to say to my colleague before he leaves, Senator Inhofe, and he left, that under this president, we've seen more domestic energy production than we've seen probably in decades and decades and decades. More domestic energy production and less reliance on foreign imported oil than we've seen in decades and decades. So let's not attack President Obama for not working to ensure that we have the domestic capacity here at home to produce energy, because we're producing it from all sources, from all sources. The other point I want to make is that my friends on the other side are ignoring the facts, and the facts are that for every $1 to $3 that will be invested in clean utilities here, clean utilities, we get back $9 in benefits. Mr. President, you have spoken on this quite often, and the fact is there are many benefits to doing this. And the other point I want to make, and I'm going to reserve until after Senator Whitehouse to close up tonight, the other point I want to make, which is very, very important, is that 1/2 of our coal-fired power plants have already made these important technology upgrades. And that is wonderful news. Well, why would we reward companies that haven't done what these others have done, that are continuing to spew forth the most dangerous chemicals? And the list of them goes on and on. But we're talking about mercury, we're talking about arsenic, lead, formaldehyde, and I'll get into that. So why are we rewarding, if we allow this congressional resolution to pass, why would we be rewarding the most recalcitrant utilities that are not cleaning up when the technology is clearly there? There's a cost-benefit ratio. Our kids will breathe better. Later on tonight, I will spell out how many deaths will be avoided, how many asthma attacks will be avoided. We hear a little coughing in the chamber today. That is a sound, unfortunately, that we hear in classrooms all over this country. If you go into a classroom and you ask how many kids have asthma, 1/3 of the kids will raise their hand. If you say, how many of you know someone with asthma or have asthma yourself, 1/2 of the kids will raise their hand. So this isn't a benign thing. What my colleague is doing is essentially pushing forward a resolution that would stop the Environmental Protection Agency from doing its job that we asked them to do 20 long years ago when we passed the Clean Air Act amendments. And with that, it is my privilege to yield up to 15 minutes to Senator Lautenberg, followed by Senator Whitehouse.
President. Mr. President.
Senator from New Jersey.
I thank Senator Boxer for her leadership in resisting this attempt to be able to permit companies to continue to pollute the air at risk to our children and marshaling the forces to say no to this. Mr. President, in a way, I feel like this is maybe a lesson that I learned when I was in business school at Columbia. If you spend money here, you might save it there, but if you don't spend it, why, you are liable to lose something. A child. The child's ability to function. What kind of a proposition are we looking at here? This isn't an accounting exercise. We're talking about the well-being of our children. And I will say this. We may have disagreements between our sides, but I believe that Republicans care as much about their kids on their side as we do on ours. But they would, in this debate, say that they have to perforce take care of the power companies and permit them to emit poisonous ingredients in the air. And I think the sentence would be more complete. It said, rather than take advantage of protecting our children. So we'd rather continue the profit buildup. It's preposterous when you think about it. So we've got, Mr. President, to continue the standards for power plants that emit mercury pollution, which is brain poison for our children. We have to make sure that we don't relinquish here and permit this contagious material to continue to be put into the air. Under our friend from Oklahoma, Senator Inhofe, his proposal would say that companies should be free to spew toxic air pollution out of their smokestacks, regardless of whether it goes into neighborhoods where our children play or in the path of their exercise and games. This is the picture that you would see. We've all seen it in different times in our lives, but we've learned something over the years. We've learned that we can reduce this threat that comes out of these smokestacks. We have developed a time in the state of New Jersey because it's from states to the west of us that we get much of the pollution in our communities. And even if we had a state's option fully, we couldn't do much about it if our neighbors to the west permit their companies to emit the poisonous air. The standards that Senator Inhofe wants to overturn, the Clean Air Act amendments that were approved by Republicans and Democrats over 20 years ago in 1990. Most Americans would be disappointed to learn that power plants have been free to put unlimited amounts of mercury into the air that our children breathe. After years of delay and dirty air, the new standards will finally require power plants to cut mercury pollution. Mercury is a highly toxic brain poison. I say it, brain poison. Even in low doses, mercury can cause damage to fetuses and infants that would permanently affect a child's development. Every year, 630,000 babies are born with unsafe levels of mercury in their blood. Let's be clear about what this means. Mercury is poison, and children are being born with it coursing through their veins. Now, these children suffer from brain damage, learning disabilities, hearing loss. The mercury that they're born with can damage their kidneys, their livers, nervous systems. And power plants that spew mercury also emit pollutants that trigger asthma attacks. And unfortunately, Mr. President, I've had the ability to see a child with an asthma attack. Happens to be my grandson. And when he's gasping for air, and if someone said, well, how much would you pay to relieve your grandson of the gasping, of the trauma that comes with that kind of condition? There is no cost that would be too much. Anyone who's seen an asthmatic child wheeze and struggle to breathe knows that we would do anything in our power to prevent asthma attacks. EPA standards prevent 130,000 asthma attacks from occurring each year. These standards, imagine that, we're protecting 130,000 asthma attacks from occurring with our kids every year. So why are Republicans proposing to erase limits on mercury pollution? We already know that EPA's new standards will save and improve lives. EPA estimates that this rule would prevent 130,000 asthma attacks, 4,700 heart attacks, and up to 11,000 premature deaths. What kind of a calamity is worse than that? There isn't any. There isn't any. Heaven help those families who are tortured by learning that the problem that they have with their children's school accomplishments could have been avoided. And for every dollar we spend to reduce pollution, we get $3 to $9 in health benefits. A child born with pollution in her body is set back from day one and is going to carry that disability for her full life. The polluters just ignore the cost to American families. These companies think that their right to pollute is more important than our kids' right to breathe. And I can't believe that they're willing to risk the health of a baby in their home or their grandchildren's home. They say they're cleaning up their act. That cleaning up their act will cut into their profits. But we know that clean air isn't just good for our health, it can be good for business. And we get proof when we look no further than in my state of New Jersey and our largest utility, Public Service Electric and Gas. They invested $1.5 billion to upgrade their power plants. PSE&G cut emissions of mercury and acid gases by 90% or more. And they created more than 1,600 new jobs in the process. And that's what happens. That's the real picture. Because it's clear about what this resolution that's proposed would do. It would effectively kill any EPA action to reduce mercury now or in the future. And it's just unacceptable. And, you know, the debate between whether or not we can save money, I say to those people who come from coal states, clean up the act. Spend the money. You're going to spend it one way or another. Wouldn't you rather spend it on doing something that's positive for the environment rather than risk your child's health? I think there's no comparison. We had an unfortunate incident in my family. I had a sister who was on the board of the school, and she was asthmatic. And she always, when we traveled together, if we traveled together, always carried a little kind of a respirator that she could plug into the cigarette lighter. And if she started to feel uncomfortable from beginning to wheeze, she could put this on and her breathing would clear up. She was at school board meeting. She had been elected to the school board in Rye, New York, and she felt an attack coming on. And she got up to go to the car, to her car in the parking lot, to get some relief from her inability to breathe. She collapsed in the parking lot, and 3 days later she expired, 53 years old. What's the price of a life? This is an adult. What about the life of a child? And we compare it to the cost. That's all we've heard about. The other side sounds like a bunch of accountants. What you talk about, how much will this cost? How much does it cost for a child who can't learn? How much does it cost to live life with a child whose body is impaired and they can't function? What's the cost? It's not, cost isn't explained in dollars. The cost is in what's right in our society. Do we have the obligation to try and protect the children that live in our country? I think so. I think so. And let the companies figure out ways to improve the quality of their air emissions. Pretty simple. They do that and the problem can be solved. But to say, no, 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 this will cost too much. And I think of a schoolyard full of little kids And I say, oh, I'd like to ask them, what's it worth to see these little kids sing Ring Around the Rosie and be happy, compared to saying to a company, no, your job is to clean up your act. You have time to do it, but you must do it. You can't avoid it any longer. So, Madam President, it's clear about what this resolution would do. It would effectively kill any EPA action to reduce mercury now or in the future. That's just unacceptable. So I say to my colleagues, defeat this measure. Look at your children, look at your grandchildren, and say to yourself, what will I do to protect her, protect him? To hear their voices nice and clear, to see them learning, to see them growing? What's more important? To protect the power plant that wants to emit more poisonous air and refuses to do their share. They're going to do it one way or the other. Look at your children. Look at your grandchildren. I urge my colleagues to defeat this measure. With that, I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
No, it's all right. We have we have another speaker. Under the previous order, Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island is recognized for up to 15 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. It is one thing, Madam President, to say things, and it is another to say things that are true. So let us review some of the things that have been said on the floor of the Senate today in the context of this discussion. One of my colleagues said that this rule, which will for the first time require our power plants to meet mercury emission standards that other industries have had to meet and have successfully met for years, that is now coming on, to use his words, too far and too fast. Too far and too fast. Well, the Clean Air Act was passed 30 years ago, and specific to this, in the year 2000, EPA began the process that has culminated in this rule, determining that it would be, quote, appropriate and necessary to have a rule on this kind of hazardous air pollution being emitted by power plants. So here we are in 2012, and we're being told that it is too fast, that utilities are obliged to comply with a program that was first announced as appropriate and necessary in the year 2000. It would seem to me that a dozen years' notice is enough, and particularly where other industries have already met these standards. On that note, the same colleague said that compliance with these standards is, quote, nearly impossible. Well, it's obviously not nearly impossible if other industries have already complied with the standard that the electric utility industry is being asked to comply with. But more specifically, this rule sets the mark at a level where the highest performing 12% of emitters already are. They're already there. So it's not a question of compliance being nearly impossible. Compliance is actually already achieved by the good-behaving and responsible utilities who have put the technology to work to clean up their exhausts. In a letter that I would like to ask unanimous consent to add to the record at the conclusion of my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
That 16 of my colleagues, led by myself and the distinguished chairwoman of the Environment Public Works Committee, Barbara Boxer, wrote to the President supporting this rule. We described, for one thing, a utility called Constellation, which has invested to add environmental controls and a new scrubber to its Brandon Shores facility in Maryland, cutting mercury emissions by 90%. And also, in addition, creating 1,385 jobs at peak construction, not counting the many more jobs manufacturing those clean air technologies. So this is not nearly impossible. This is being done regularly. And the other remark that was made by this colleague is that the country does not support EPA on this. To the contrary, actually, public health groups and officials across the country support this. The Academy of Pediatrics, the Association of Respiratory Care, the Heart Association, the Lung Association, the American Nurses Association, the Public Health Association, the March of Dimes. It's a considerable number of public health supporters. And if you want to go beyond the public health community, it's interesting to note that the faith community is very actively supporting our position on this. Everything from the Evangelical Environmental Network to the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to the General Baptist Convention of Texas to the National Council of Churches USA to the Jewish Council on Public Affairs to the U.S. Conference on Catholic Bishops and the United Methodist Church. So to say that America does not support the EPA in this, I think, is to take a very constricted view of America. Perhaps the occupants of the electric utility boardrooms in America would be more precise. Some of the folks that support this, interestingly, aren't just health groups, but they are the electric utilities themselves. Half of the fossil fuel generating electric power plants in the country are controlled by electric utilities that support the EPA rule. Let me read some examples from this same letter. The chairman, president, and CEO of Wisconsin Energy said, "We really see very little impact on customer electric rates or our capital plan between now and 2015 as a result of all the new EPA regulations that have been proposed. Very little impact." The senior vice president of energy policy at Seminole Electric Cooperative indicated that if the EPA adopts a mercury rule as currently proposed, Seminole would already be meeting that standard. So much for it being nearly impossible. Duke Energy's CEO noted that "I think 3 years is doable, not too fast, doable," as a compliance timeline for this rule. And the CEO of PSENG stated that "We are well positioned to meet the anticipated requirements under EPA's MACT regulation. We believe these regulations are long overdue, not coming too fast, long overdue. Our experience shows that it is possible to clean the air, create jobs, and power the economy, all at the same time." Another one of my colleagues said that higher electric bills should be measured on the one hand against the negligible benefits on the other hand. That was a theme that a number of colleagues adopted. Another one said that this was all costs, no benefits. A third said that this bill fails to find the proper balance between cost and benefit. And a fourth said that this bill would be, that the rule would be hammering our economy, in effect a tax increase. What are the facts? The facts are that although this bill, the rule, will cost $9.6 billion to implement, because there is better health, because there are beneficial effects of not polluting our country with all of these dangerous chemicals, the benefits are between $37 and $90 billion. $9 billion in cost, $37 to $90 billion every year in savings in benefit to our economy. On the whole, this is a huge economic win for the country. The only place where it's a problem is, again, in the boardrooms of the electric utility companies that have not been good citizens, that have not put the scrubbers on, that are trailing the rest of the industry and don't want to be forced to catch up to where other industries and half of their industry now is. And if you want to move off, as Senator Lautenberg so movingly did, the accounting of this $9 billion in cost versus $37 to $90 billion in benefits, there are the 11,000 lives that will be saved every year. You can't put a price on a human life. This will save them. The last point is that the distinguished ranking member of the Environment and Public Works Committee described a relentless war And what he was referring to is, I think, an imagined war by the Obama administration against the coal industry. I think if there is a relentless war out here, and I'm speaking now as a senator from Rhode Island, it is a relentless war of these polluting coal plants against the northeastern states in particular, my state in particular, that carry the burden of all the fallout of that exhaust and that pollution that they don't bother to treat at the source, so it lands in our state. Let me ask unanimous consent also to add into the record the resolution in support of the EPA mercury and air toxic standards for power plants that was adopted by the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I won't read the whole thing, but let's just read the concluding paragraph. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the U.S. Conference of Mayors strongly supports the EPA's issued mercury and air toxic standards for power plants.
Without objection, we will put that in the record.
There were no federal standards for mercury until now for our power plants. You would think that we should have done this by now. Well, yes, we should have done this by now. But at last, we are here. At last, we will achieve the benefits of $1 in cost for $3 to $9 in savings and in benefits to Americans. We should be celebrating this sensible and yet significant public health achievement, and instead we are engaged in a debate that I think is confounded on their side. Their arguments are confounded by the actual facts. The benefits are really staggering. In addition to the 11,000 lives saved, 4,700 fewer heart attacks, 130,000 fewer cases of children suffering asthma attacks, 5,700 fewer emergency room visits each year. And let me close by mentioning one specific thing. Mercury is a neurotoxin. The reason that people use the phrase mad as a hatter is because hatters making hats used mercury, and mercury poisoned them, made them mad, affected their brains. It is a neurotoxin. And that really affects Rhode Island quite considerably. First of all, we're a state that is downwind. Every Rhode Islander has heard as that we drive into work on a summer, bright weekday morning, the radio warning, today's a bad air day in Rhode Island, children, people with breathing difficulties, seniors should stay indoors today in their air conditioning. It's a beautiful day. People have a right to be out of doors on a beautiful day. They should be celebrating, playing, having picnics, going to the beach. But no, stay indoors because there is ozone pollution that is settling on us from these power plants. In addition to that, the mercury comes in, and that creates a different set of harms in Rhode Island. One harm is that small children should not eat any freshwater fish in Rhode Island, according to our health department. Here's a wonderful Norman Rockwell picture of sort of an emblematic American scene, Grandpa taking his grandson fishing, the excitement as the fish comes up out of the pond. Well, that image in Rhode Island is shadowed by the fact that this small child would not be allowed to eat any freshwater fish that he caught with his grandfather because of this mercury pollution that has been bombarded in on us by these out-of-state power plants that did not clean up their act. The further rules, no one in Rhode Island, not just small children, no one in Rhode Island should eat more than one serving of freshwater fish caught in our state each month. So if the grandfather caught 2 fish, he could eat 1 for a month, but he shouldn't eat the other because of the health effects of the mercury that is piled up in the bodies of the fish. And there are some bodies of water that seem to be more in the gun sights of these polluting, dirty Midwestern power plants than others for reasons that nobody can explain. But Quidnick Reservoir in Rhode Island, the Wincheck Pond in Rhode Island, and Yawgoog Pond in Rhode Island, no one should ever eat any of the fish caught in those 3 bodies of water because of the mercury poisoning. So when we talk about every dollar that a utility will spend to clean up its pollution being offset by $3 to $9 in benefits, that figure doesn't take into account these intangible benefits. It doesn't take into account the intangible benefit of being able to enjoy the emblematic American pastime of taking your grandson or going with your grandfather to go fishing in a pond, to be able to catch something, bring it home, fry it up, and have it for supper. The utility polluters get to wreck that for free in this equation, but we should not forget it in this chamber. There are many aspects of the American way of life that should not yield to the bottom line of those polluters who are not willing to meet the same rules that so many of their colleagues already do and that so many industries already do. Madam Chairman, I will yield the floor, and I will note the absence of a quorum long enough for me to replace the chair so that she may take the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call a roll.
Mr. Acosta.
The Senator from California.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be dispensed.
Without objection.
I want to thank you very much, Mr. President, for taking the chair again, and then for your beautiful statement. I thought that you definitely debated the issue. You took apart the argument that my Republican friends made against a rule that is widely supported by the American people. You know, you cited some of the amazing organizations. I will do that again tomorrow in the debate. And just for the sake of the folks who are still working here tonight, I don't plan to go much more than 5 minutes. So it's been a very long day for everyone who works here, and I respect that. So it's not only these amazing groups that are with us on this that want us to defeat this very dangerous resolution. My colleague named some of them. The American nurses, who they understand what health care is about. They see people struggling to find a breath coming in with these attacks. But it's also the religious organizations who recognize that we are only as good as the weakest among us, and it's our kids, as Senator Lautenberg pointed out so eloquently, that get the real impact of this many times, as well as adults. So what I want to do in closing out the debate tonight, and we will have another hour of debate tomorrow, is just run through a few charts that really tell the tale. The first one is, what does this resolution do? Because I know people may be following us to say, what exactly does Senator Inhofe and his colleagues want to do? They want to repeal a rule that's about to go into place. It would block the Environmental Protection Agency from implementing the first ever national mercury and air toxic standards for power plants. These power plants are giving off these poisons. And these poisons are going into the air. In the case of the mercury, you wind up poisoning the fish, which was such a great part of my colleague Senator Whitehouse's presentation. So poisons are being spewed into the air from these power plants. And in 1990, in a vote of 89 to 10, and in the House 401 to 25, we passed the Clean Air Act. And those were the amendments. And it was signed by George Herbert Walker Bush. And more than 20 years later, we have a court order here because we didn't do what we're supposed to do. And now the President Obama, is doing the right thing to protect the people by moving forward with this first ever national standard. So we have to defeat this push to stop the Obama administration from doing what we wanted them to do since 1990, we wanted the then EPA to do, and it's taken this much time to get it done. And just as we're on the brink of getting this protective rule, which is so cost efficient that for every dollar or $3, we save $9, they want to turn it around. Now, what's at stake? 4,200 to 11,000 additional premature deaths. So when people say what we do doesn't matter, I say look at this. If this rule is repealed, more people will die prematurely. We'll have 4,700 heart attacks, 130,000 cases of childhood asthma symptoms, 6,300 cases of acute bronchitis, 5,700 emergency room visits and hospital admissions, 540,000 days of missed work due to respiratory illness, and again, $3 to $9 in benefits for every $1 invested in these power plants, one half of which have already done the right thing. Half of the coal power plants have done this already. So we're talking about ensuring that the rest of them do the same. Many companies have addressed their mercury and air toxic emissions. We should thank the coal companies who have already cleaned up their act, not reward those who have delayed installing the pollution control equipment. Anyone on the other side who says there's no pollution control equipment available and this can't be done and it's going to result in increased electric utility rates should listen to the facts. Talk to the people who already installed these important mechanisms. They created jobs doing it, and electricity prices, really, there was no impact. Okay. I talked about the jobs that are provided when we clean up these utilities. 8,000 long-term jobs and 46,000 short-term jobs. It's actually a jobs bill when we clean up to current standards. What poisonous emissions does the Clean Air Rule address? And I think this is, basically where I'm going to end it. I'm going to mention these things, and they sound scary because they are. Mercury and lead. This is what we're asking them to clean up, and my colleagues say, oh, no, no, keep on polluting. Mercury and lead damages the nervous system of children and harms the brains of infants. Arsenic, sounds scary? It is. Causes cancer and damages the nervous system, kidneys and the liver. And my Republican friends say, oh, it's okay. Who cares? Well, we should all care. How about selenium? It harms the reproductive system of wildlife. Other heavy metals, cadmium, chromium, cause cancer and harm vital organs. Benzene causes cancer and damages immune and reproductive systems. How about this one? Formaldehyde. It sounds scary. It's scary. It's a carcinogen. That means it causes cancer. No question about it. Acid gases. Sounds scary? It's scary. Damage the heart, the lungs, the nervous system. Imagine breathing in acid gases and what that does to your pulmonary system. Toxic soot pollution causes respiratory illness, including asthma attacks, chronic bronchitis, heart attacks, and premature death. And tomorrow I'll go into these in greater detail. Why would anyone in their right mind, it's just a rhetorical question, Mr. President, stand in the way of cleaning up these poisons? They say it costs too much? No, it doesn't. Because the companies that already did it say it's working out. And for every dollar that we invest, we save 3 to 9. So it doesn't cost too much. Is it just about doing business as usual? Well, that's fine if all you're doing is something that's benign. This is not benign. And my colleague, Senator Inhofe, attacked the president and said our president is stymieing domestic energy production when we have the opposite truth. We have seen a tremendous increase in domestic energy production under this president, more than we've seen for decades. So don't blame this president and say he's trying to stymie domestic energy production. He has embraced in all of the above strategy. And I would ask permission to insert in the record a paper here, Developing and Securing America's Energy Supplies. May I put this in the record? And it shows how U.S. crude oil production is way